Has anyone lost a job or a home? Has anyone lost a best friend? Did anyone lose a dream they had in life that they really thought they would have when they were this age? So you see, we all are so connected with loss. And even though my loss came as the loss of a child, we all experience loss. And the worst loss I found out that a person can experience is loss of self. And that was one of the three choices I had when I lost my daughter. When my daughter was murdered and I buried her, I realized that the way I handled this loss was going to carve out my soul's destination in some powerful ways. And I also realized one day that if I let fear and anger keep me from being myself on earth, that I definitely wouldn't exist. I just wouldn't be here. I'd be taking up space. And when Joann and I used to walk and go on some of our adventures, I would tell her, I said, you know, Joann, this is the last time I'm going to be down here. And she'd say, huh? And I said, yeah, I just believe it is. I said, it's just, I've got a feeling that I'm going to get it all this time. And so she would say, you're not going to leave anytime soon, are you? And I'd say, no, I'm not going to leave until you're finished with me. So every time we'd talk and say goodbye, she'd say, you're not going anywhere. And I'd say, no, not until you're finished with me. Well, little did I know she was going to leave this earth before me. But I'm still fulfilling my promise to Joann. I'm not going anywhere until she's finished with me down here. And she's got a lot of explaining to do while she's up there having fun, and I'm here finishing this job. But I'm not going to quit until she's finished with me, and I've got the message that she wants me to tell you. I have considered what is my lesson that I wanted to have this time in life. And I realized that it's loss and letting go and pure faith. And in order to have pure faith, in order to have two things, pure faith and experience life to the fullest, I had to lose all my beliefs. I had to lose all my identity of who I thought I was. Anything that served me in the past that I could count on had to be gone, because that's the only way I could truly experience anything in the moment as myself and real. So in order for me to finish what I started and to accomplish the task that I think I wanted to have down here, and then I was thinking, what was I thinking when I said I wanted this? But I have known what it's like to carry a soul in my body getting ready to enter this earth. I have been there at the very second that life entered this earth. I got to be with that human being, and I got to experience things and learn things from that human being for 30 years. Then I got to witness the death of that human being and put her earthly body in the ground. So I truly know life from beginning to end here on earth. I also have seen the unconditional face of God in my two children's eyes. And I've always said that my two children were a hug from God, because I could just feel His presence when I hugged my children. I also have had an intimate relationship with evil for the last 12 years. They caught the man that murdered my daughter, and I've in some ways had to be on his path for a while and look into his eyes. So I've had two extremes, but I can say that I haven't missed anything. Would I do this again if I knew that the pain was there? Yes. because through the experiences that I've had, by being myself and by being present in my own life and living with sheer guts some days, I've experienced the most beautiful things you can experience on earth. And I know for a fact angels exist. And I didn't really, Joann loved angels, and she talked about angels all the time. And she was a very, very spiritual person. But we also had a lot of fun and lived life to the fullest. And so this was one of our many adventures that I got to experience everything I ever wanted to do in life with my daughter. We went out west, climbed the Grand Tetons. We got on the merry-go-round at Disney World when she was 28. It was absolutely beautiful. And so if there's anything I can encourage you to do is to live life to the fullest. And do the things that you dream of, and hug the people that you love. But angels were a real important part of Joann's life, and I just kind of dismissed them. And after she died, she left a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old nephews. And the 3-year-old, a couple of years later, would say, "Where's Aunt JoJo?" And so we would try to explain the best we could where Aunt JoJo was. But then that brought about questions. Well, where is heaven? Well, is she doing anything up there she likes? Is she all alone? I mean, it just brought all these questions. And then one evening when Beth was telling Kyle about this, he started crying, and she said, "Kyle, what is the matter?" And he said, "I'm going to miss myself when I die." So, how do you explain to a small child something like this? But then again, when I went through this, I was just like that small child. All my beliefs, everything that I thought was real left me instantly the moment I heard that my child was dead. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the crime. I choose not to spend too much time on the crime because, number one, during the trial, he said that he had left information of what he was going to do in the crime and what he wanted out of life, and it was to rape, rob, and pillage and become famous. And he had only been out of prison 3 weeks when Joann entered her cabin, and he was there. So I'm going to not give him that honor. And you won't see his name in my book. But this was Joann when she bought her cabin. She was a nurse practitioner. She graduated from Vanderbilt. She was a nurse practitioner. And she got a job in Blue Ridge, Georgia. And in 2 short years, she had over 3,000 patients. She was excellent. She was very good. They were underserved. And she wanted me to take a picture of her every day, in every room in that cabin when she bought it. So this was Joann 2 years before she died. And that was in her new cabin. I was sitting on the steps talking to a neighbor about having my fingers manicured when she was dying. And that still haunts me today some. But when I saw the man, he was 6'9". He had just been out of prison for about 3 weeks, and he came to live with his mother. And Joann was just the epitome of love. I've heard that so much here, that just the epitome of love gets the hardest road sometimes. But she didn't have any idea he existed, but his mother carried him around the community to tell him where everybody lived, so he knew she existed. So one Sunday evening, he was waiting for her when she entered her cabin. It was the Sunday that we bombed overseas after 9/11. I don't know if you remember that. But after 9/11, on October 7th, we bombed overseas. And because of that, we tightened all the borders. And he had taken her vehicle and had tried to get over the Canadian border. And that's how they caught him. And he had just gotten out of federal prison, so there was an all-points bulletin all over the United States. At that time, I didn't have a cell phone. And thank God, that evening, she usually called every Sunday, and she didn't call that Sunday evening. And finally, a friend called and said, Janie, I can't get in touch with Joann. Can you help me try to see if she's okay? So I called the hospitals. I called everybody I could think of. She'd been seen. She was shopping in Chattanooga that afternoon. And I didn't pay too much attention to it until about 9 o'clock that night, and still couldn't get her on the phone. So I called the Chattanooga Police Department, and they said that if I would come there, they would start looking for her early. So I didn't have a cell phone. I had asked all the policemen in our community to go check her cabin to see if she were there, and her vehicle wasn't there, so we all assumed she just hadn't made it home. Nobody went in her cabin yet. So I went to Chattanooga, filled out the papers, and they said, you've got to stay somewhere where we can get in touch with you. So they took me to a motel room and that had a phone. And I didn't sleep all that night. I called my son, and I said, Joann's missing. I've got a son that's 11 months older than Joann. I said, Joann's missing. Can you come help me? And about 8:30 that morning, she should have been at work. So I called her clinic, and she wasn't there yet. And I said, can somebody please go see if Joann's in her cabin? Now, the night before, when I was at home and I was so worried, I was sitting there frantic, and all of a sudden this peace came over me, just totally came over me. And for a second, I thought, oh, God, no. It just felt like Joann. I thought, my God, don't let her be dead. And, I didn't put that her car was missing, and that when they called and told me that she was deceased, I didn't put together that her car was missing and they found her in her cabin, that there had been a crime. I still was, I guess, thinking she had a heart attack or something. So I just lost all reality. When I heard that on the telephone in that hotel room all by myself, I just lost all reality and started screaming. And the first thing I could think of was I needed to get there to hug my child before she died. Before they took her away. And I was about 2.5 hours from the Ocoee. So I just fell to my knees and just asked for help from something. Ran out into the parking lot, and this man said, can I help you? And I told him what had happened, and I said, I don't even know where the interstate is, and I've got to find my daughter's cabin. He said, you follow me, and I'll get you there. And so I did. I followed him. Once I got on the right road to get to her cabin, I was going to turn around and wave to say thank you, and he was not there. So I found out later that that was the first encounter I had with an angel. When I got to the cabin and there was yellow tape everywhere, then I knew. And this detective came over to the car and he said, are there any questions? Have you got anything you need to ask me? And all I could do was just turn away and go sit on the side of the mountain and just scream why. And at that point in time, it became very riveting to me, because when I was driving to Joann's cabin, I'd always been a very spiritual person and raised my children to be very spiritual. And on the way to the cabin, I could hear myself begging Joann to help me. There was no loving power in my life anymore. There was no loving God. I didn't even know what was real anymore. I couldn't comprehend anything but that my child was in my life 2 days ago. And now this moment, she's not here. And so I was just begging her to help me through this. Well, that prayer definitely came true. I've got to say this. At that moment, I was given the way we need to live life, because all I could do was put one foot in front of another make the next right decision I could, do the next thing, and not worry about anything else. And I've actually learned to do that in my life today, and it's a beautiful way of living, to just be myself and totally in the moment. So finally, they released the cabin. There was a crime scene investigation for 2 days while we sat out there. And they finally released the cabin so we could get something to bury Joann and see if there was any papers we needed. And so I couldn't go in because it was a very bloody scene and a very vicious, horrible scene. And but I wanted her baby ring so badly. And I said, if anybody can find her jewelry box, please bring me her jewelry box. So they did, and I found her baby ring. And I started wearing her baby ring around my neck. And then I got, about a month later, I got word that I might lose it. So I took several pieces from her jewelry box and the baby ring, and I took it to a jeweler. And I said, will you please make a nugget and put this baby ring in the very center of it? So he said, fine. And so 2 weeks later, he called, said it was ready, and I went to the jeweler to pick it up. And when I walked in the door, he said, you need to sit down. He said, what story does this nugget tell? And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. And he said, well, he said, I always melt the gold in the metal, and I always let it form pretty much the way it wants to, and I smooth the edges. But he said, as soon as I put that baby ring in that metal, the center separated and made its own shape. And he said, I just let it be there for a while. Well, I've got the nugget on. And I don't know if you can see it here in a moment, but as you can see, the baby ring's in the middle of the front, and it's separated into a heart on the back. So that has just really been something that I have held on to deeply. Someone came up and told me that she had taken out an insurance policy 2 months before she died at 30 years old. And my first thought was, oh, what does she want me to do with this? And so finally on Mother's Day, she died in October, and on Mother's Day I woke up and I knew what she wanted. She and I were going to go out west and build a wellness center for children and women and anybody to feel empowered. This is what was so hard for me to believe, was that here was a young woman who had spent her whole life wanting to help others, and we were going to build a wellness center so that people would feel empowered and be able to do choices in their life and live their own dreams. And all of a sudden, she was tragically taken. And I kept thinking, you know, there just can't be a God that could be around. I wasn't mad at God. I wasn't mad at anything like that. I couldn't comprehend it. I just couldn't comprehend that there was a loving spirit. And that's a total difference between being mad and shutting out. Because comprehending, I was pretty much like the little 3-year-old boy that was going to miss himself when he died. I didn't know what was real. I didn't know who I could trust. I couldn't trust myself. I mean, how do you understand plummeting to hell in a split second and not remembering the trip? You know, I didn't even know where I was. Didn't know what I believed. But I've gotten all that back in a very pure way, in a very pure spirit. And don't get me wrong, I would give anything in the world to hug my child one more time. But she is with me so big and so strong. And she has taught me so many wonderful things. And you know, I don't see anything as a coincidence anymore. And I don't see anything that's not for my benefit. There's just no wasted moments. Not at all. And I've learned to expect miracles because they certainly do happen. The little 3-year-old that was going to miss himself when he died, and it was wanting to know if is Aunt Joann happy, if she got friends to play with. Well, I had he and his brother in my car one day, and just out of the blue, he said, Aunt Joann visited me at school today. And I said, she did? What'd she say? And he said, she didn't say anything. She just smiled. She wanted just to see my friends. And so he was fine. He knew Joann was okay. He opened up my believing in angels, because it still took me quite a while. Well, I knew what to do on Mother's Day. What I was going to do with that money was finish out Joann's Wellness Center. So I built a 1,000-square-foot gazebo, like building in the middle of a hardwood forest. And it's been thousands of children. It's called Joann's Outdoor Classroom. And thousands of children have come there and learned about nature. You know, there was a class there that was called A Sense of Place, where middle schoolers wrote about their sense of place in this world. There's been weddings. The most wonderful wedding I saw was, I was kind of hiding back in the woods. I didn't want to be disturbing. But in this outdoor classroom, they had on all their dress clothes. They had flowers, candelabra, the whole thing. And I looked, and the bride was walking down the wooden trail in a long dress, barefooted. And it was the most wonderful, because that's what Joann would have done. And so I'm sure she was smiling the whole time. But I decided that, now, I need to tell you that in the middle of me building the classroom and all the miracles that are taking place in my life, I'm also getting things ready for the trial. It took 3 years of hearings before the trial could even be done. And when Joann died, I had 20 years of sobriety. Hadn't had a drink in 20 years. And I made it for another year and a half. But I went through the hearings, and all the hearings were about making sure this man didn't suffer if he got the death penalty. And they went over every detail of the crime, time after time, and every detail. And someone asked me and said, do you have to be there? And I said, no, I don't. But I'm going to be there for my child. And I wasn't there the moment she left this earth, but I'm going to know what she endured when she left this earth. I'm going to be with her. So it was after one hearing, and they kept, it was the whole day was on, let's make sure this man he's on death row in Terre Haute, Indiana. People, I speak a lot at U.S. Justice System conferences, and people will say, are you wanting revenge? Are you going to be there when he dies? And on and on and on. And it's not that at all. He was the last person my child saw on earth. And I want to be the last person he sees on earth. And it's just quite simple. Another thing I want to explain is that you've heard so many visions of us all being one, all connected to one. I love the talk before me. Well, one day Joann came to me in my bedroom after a couple of years, and she explained to me, I like metaphors, and so she explained to me in a metaphor what it's like. And she said, Mom, we're just down here, and I was in shock that day, I've got to tell you, when this happened. And I learned later that it's automatic writing when you've got something that's just coming in, and I was just typing on my computer as fast as I could once I realized it was Joann. But she said, we're just in these bodysuits down here on earth so that we can learn things and experience things, and it's just an illusion. It's not really who we are, but we're just down here in these bodysuits. And she said, it's really fascinating because there's this huge grapevine up here. And it flows all the way down into earth. And this one great grapevine is God. But on the grapevine, there's bunches of grapes. And she said, those are the soul families that stick together. And she said, they're similar. They're made out of the same thing. They got the same texture. But if you look at grapes, they're all a little bit different. And some are more ripe than others. And so maybe the next time you go to the grocery store, you'll see grapes differently. But that's how she explained it. And I asked her, I said, Joann, what happens to those people who abuse children, who kill children, who are truly evil in this world? And she said, well, Mom, some grapes dry up or sour up, and they're put in the trash bin. Well, that left me with a question after I processed it for a while after our conversation. And I thought, if we're all God, how in the world do we get put in a trash heap and don't exist anymore? Well, there's a wonderful woman that I ran into named Emma. And Emma is the person who's taught me how to listen to angels and how to hear angels. And she gave me the first hope that Joann still existed. And she was a psychic I went to at the Galactic Expo in Nashville. And she said some things that I knew were only Joann could have let her know. And she said something that I didn't even have to know if it was true or not. It penetrated my heart. She said, Joann is telling me that no matter what, y'all been through a lot of lifetimes together, but no matter what, you always find each other, even if you're separated. And that just penetrated my heart so much that was my first stepping stone back into a spiritual world. I want to tell you, the 3 years I had not believing in spiritual world were the darkest 2 years of my entire life. They were very dark. And I was really glad to start climbing out of that. So anyway, after one of the hearings, when I got very, very desperate, I pulled right into a liquor store and bought a bottle of alcohol. And when I first started drinking it when I got home, it was like I was visited by an old friend again. And it was wonderful because I started losing reality, I started losing the pain, I started losing all that stuff that had kept me awake every night and kept me screaming. But I want to make sure that I also share this. It took me back to the gates of hell that it did the 20 years earlier. And I found out that it certainly doesn't take the pain away, and that one of the things that I did when I was very, very drunk one night was try to kill myself. I just totally gave up. I lost all resolve and tried to kill myself. And a friend had found me, and they got me to the hospital immediately. And so I feel like I'm right now. They had me hooked up to all these wires and all this stuff when I woke up. And it was a very helpless feeling. And I was going in and out because what I'd done was on top of a gallon of vodka, I'd taken a whole bottle of antidepressants. So I was a little bit sleepy the next day when I came out of it. But another thing happened that day. Joann had saved up a lot of books and a lot of tapes and all for the Wellness Center. And so I gave them to the library, to our county library. And the very day, I found out later, the very day that I tried to kill myself, this lady that paints angels checked out one of Joann's books. And that story will be resumed in just a minute. I got visited another way. In the classroom, I have a Christmas tree every Christmas, and people from all over bring ornaments for loved ones that they've lost, and it's a beautiful thing that we do. And the first year, I was crying and was so upset that we'd lost all these people and they weren't walking on earth anymore. And I felt a nudge behind me and turned around, and there was the doe looking me right in the eye. And it was like the spirits were saying, we're still here. We're still here. So let me get back to the book that was checked out of the library. It was 4 years before the trial, and the only prayer I could pray was, God, tell me where my child is. I was getting some spirituality back, but as a mother on gut level, I needed to know where my child was. I couldn't comprehend where my child was in any other shape or location. And I just begged God. I said, you know, I'll make it through the trial if you'll let me know where Joann is. So three days before the trial, a friend of mine called, and she said, Janie, you're not going to believe this, but I was in a department store. A friend of mine was in a department store. And she was standing behind a lady with an angel on the back of her shirt. And she asked the lady, she said, where did you get that shirt? And she said, I paint angels for a living. And she said, well, what are you working on now? And the woman said, well, it's the strangest thing. I checked a book out of the library, and it had a little short thing about a story about this beautiful young woman that was 30 years old, that was a nurse practitioner in Georgia and was murdered. And she said, I read the book, and all I could think of when I finished the book, which the book was Angel Therapy, by the way, was I kept hearing this voice that said, you've got to paint me as an angel for my mom. You've got to paint me as an angel for my mom. So she just started painting, and she started painting a painting of a young woman she'd never seen before, for a woman she had never met, but she trusted. Well, my friend's friend said, she said, I don't know if I can find this mother to give the painting to. And so my friend's friend said, you're not going to believe this, but I know how you can get in touch with this woman. I'm friends with one of her best friends. So Amy, the friend she took it to, called me at work, and she said, you're not going to believe this. And she said, but this lady painted a painting of Joann, and she's brought it to my place, and she wants you to have it, but she's not here. She wants you to know it's from Joann. And I read a letter when I went to her office. I read a letter. It's 5 feet tall. And I read the letter from the artist, and she said that it was very easy to paint Joann because Joann told her what she looked like, told her what she wanted on the painting. And she said, in the book I was reading of Joann's, there was in her own handwriting, it said, work with Gabriel. So I put that on the banner. As working with Gabriel. I knew. 3 days before the trial, I knew. And she had never seen Joann before. Oh my gosh, I got more miracles, but I'm going to finish up. I want to tell you, I want to make sure that I tell you about another special person in my life. Emma connected me to the spirit world and let me know about angels and opened me up to that. But there was still something missing. I was missing my walks with Joann. I was missing her questions about life. I was missing digging down deep, trying to find something to help her with when she had something she needed to know. And so I said, God, you've given me so much. I don't want to not be grateful, because I was very grateful for everything that was left. And that's gotten me through, is my gratitude for what is left and the blessings I've been given. But I said, I just miss Joann so much walking with her. Well, 2 days later, I'm walking my dog in the neighborhood, and I run into this young woman walking her dog. And we had struck up a conversation and been walking for the last 3 years. And it just is such a blessing in my life. Her name is Emily, and she's here with me. So I've been given that. Everything I've asked for, I have been given. I want to make sure that you understand that your prayers they're not ignored and they don't go unheard. All right, here comes the book. I wanted to do something to keep my daughter's memory alive. And when I was going through all this, when I was going through experiences, I didn't know what was real, but I'd just write down what was going on and I'd put it in a box. Well, starting to write a story about Joann and our journey together, I had to become familiar again with our spiritual beliefs and what we believed and the things that I felt to get me to where I was at that point. Now, I want you to notice that red feather. I knew the name of the book needed to be Payment for Passage, but I got the wrong meaning of it. It's the reason I had trouble starting it out. I thought Payment for Passage was all the stuff you had to pay and give up to be down here. I didn't realize Payment for Passage was all the rewards and gifts you get for being down here. Once I realized that, the book was easy, and she definitely helped me in co-authoring it. But she just said, Mom, just start typing with nothing in mind, no judgment, nothing the book has to say, and you're going to know the meaning of your life. And she was right. So the book was absolutely wonderful, but can you go back to the slide with the red feather? If you can, good. If you can't, that's okay. They saw the red feather. Joann comes to me as a redbird. And my friends know this, and I've got redbirds all over my kitchen, statues and everything else. But I didn't put it in the manuscript because it's a very personal thing about me and Joann and how she comes to me. So I put nothing in the manuscript. Well, I had a picture that I kind of wanted on as the cover of the book. And I talked to Dolores. And by the way, the biggest question I asked myself after Joann's death was, what is more powerful, love or evil? Well, I was on my bike one day, and Dolores called me and said she was interested in the book, and I knew love. Love's going to carry on, which is the most profound truth I have discovered in this lifetime. You might want to ask yourself every now and then, what is the most profound truth I have discovered this far in my journey? And that definitely is a big one for me today. But anyway, Dolores said, no, we've got an artist that we like to do the covers. So I thought, okay, that's great. I'll wait and see how he does the cover. And when I found out it was on Amazon and looked at the cover, there's a huge red feather on the cover of the book. And I hadn't mentioned that to anybody, and I immediately called you, and I said, how in the world did y'all come up with this cover? They said, John always listens to his heart and his intuition, and none of us knew why a redbird feather needed to be on a beach, but we trusted. And it was like Joann was saying, Mom, you can't miss this one. And believe it or not, after all this, I still need proof some days. I'm still a human being. I still need proof. But I'm here to tell you that what you've lost in your life is getting you somewhere. And I truly believe that if you utilize that loss as a portal for transformation, you're going to get what you came down here for every single time, without a doubt. What's life like today? Well, I do a lot of dancing with the little 3-year-old that asks, where's Aunt JoJo? And my son got me riding bikes, so I rode 50 miles on New Year's Day with my son and some Eagle Scouts. And that's another thing. Find something, and then I'll hush, and we'll ask questions. One of the keys for me starting to live such a wonderful life and what I call a very full life, a rewarding life, I found something that I can do from time to time that lets me just be me. When I'm on that bicycle, I'm not a mother, I'm not a friend, I'm not an employee. I'm not a woman. I'm nothing but me on that bicycle. And I can just be. And I really want to encourage everybody to find something where you can just be and be in the moment. So my profound truth that I've discovered I'd like to share with you so far is love is more powerful than evil. Are there any questions?
The one that does our covers does not read the manuscripts.
Mm-mm.
He just gets it intuitively. He says he's not psychic, but he has to be.
Yes.
And so he comes up with these covers out of nowhere, and they're always very fitting. They make sense. But I think it's a story of courage. You know, in the movies, they always show the trial as happening immediately. It's not like that. She said 3 years she had to sit in that courtroom listening to them go over and over and over every detail again and again and again. How many of you could take that? So there's definitely reasons in all of this, and I think you do a good job of describing it in the book.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, now it's time for some questions. We've got about 10 minutes anyway for questions. Or maybe you answered everything. But I remember toward the end, you said when you finally came out of this fog and was able to perceive that Joni was there, she began talking to you, and you said, well, I thought I lost you. She said, Mom, I've been here all along. I've just been waiting for you to be ready to see me.
Yeah, that was one of the things, too. You know, I found out if you're not, I heard at her funeral this wonderful thing about this divine place that our spirits soar when we die, and all the blessings and the beauty there. And what I didn't realize was that you don't have to die to experience that. And the way you experience that is to find love for yourself. And until I could find love for myself and I was at home in my body with my spirit, they couldn't connect. She said there's no way that angels can connect with you or the divine can connect with you unless you're at home. It's like they're knocking on the door and you're not in there. And so it took me several years to learn to love myself again enough to accept her love. And then she could come through.
Well, I've almost changed my mind several times about this question because it seems like it's a very hard question to ask. You mentioned the withered grape. And you said you wanted to be there at his end. So has your daughter spoken about what she wants for him, or is that never an issue, or do you look at this as finding forgiveness for him, or what is it that
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's the part I left out. That is so important. I'm not sure about the meaning of forgiveness. I mean, it's like there's as many definitions as there are people. What has helped me is, the way I see it, is giving someone the dignity of their own life and their own choices to live out whatever consequences those are, but let people have the dignity of their own life and their own choices. Okay? And let go. Letting go is the one thing I think that lets me come home back to myself, is to let go of everything that's outside. Now, why, if I'm such a loving, wonderful person, would I want to see someone die? Because the explanation to me was that we are like 95% divine. And 5%, whoever we're down here being and trying to learn and take care of. It's not the divine part of us that dies. Those that are evil or have done some really horrible things and don't need to be around a lot of people that went to the trash heap. That's the 5% that was us. If the 5% that was us is productive and loving, they get to continue on. If not, that 5% is non-existent anymore. But that's almost a relief for the person that was in so much pain and misery that you've got to be in to commit so many evil crimes. So that's how I see it. It's not so much that eye for eye. That person can finally get out of that 5% misery and maybe do something in a different way. I hope that, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that was a big important part of what I was wanting to say about that. Thank you.
The important thing is, look what a valuable lesson that Joni taught everyone involved. That's the main thing. And we do know we make our choices when we come in, we make our plans. Mm-hmm. And so her plan, even though it seems strange, was to die in this way, to teach people something and to learn something for her soul. Mm-hmm. So she has passed on a very valuable lesson.
Yeah. And I think her lesson was that you don't die.
So we can look at it that way. Everything always has a reason. What did you learn from the situation? That's what you have to look at.
Yeah, it was funny. I was outside earlier this morning, and there was one woman trying to get in the building, and I don't know if you've noticed, she's waving her hand. There's 12 doors out there. And I was outside, and I knew the one door she could go through. And she was hurrying and all, and she was saying, "The doors are locked, the door." I said, "No, there's one door," and I kept trying to point to her which door was open. She tried all 11 of the other doors before she came back, and I showed her the one that should be opened. And she went through it. That's how I learn. God will say, "Here's the door," and I'll go through the 11 that don't open, thank God, first, but then I never forget where that one door is. So thank you for that.
We spend too much time trying to open the doors that are not supposed to go
That's
through.
exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right.